Hello and welcome to Virtual Investor Conferences. On behalf of OTC Markets, we're very pleased you joined us for our three-day Metals and Mining Conference. Our next live presentation is from Alta Copper. Please note you may submit questions for the presenter in the box to the left of the slides, and you can view a company's availability for one-on-one meetings by clicking Book a Meeting in the top toolbar. At this point, I'm very pleased to welcome Giulio Bonifacio. He's the President, Chief Executive Officer, and Director of Alta Copper, which trades on the OTCQX Best Market under the symbol ATCUF and on the TSX under the symbol ATCU. Welcome back, Giulio.
Thank you very much, John, for having us today, and very, very pleased that we've got folks that have joined the call to listen to the opportunity here. And clearly, I guess the first slide really gives you a sense of what the project and company is all about, and it's about a very, very big copper project located in the northern part of Peru. Significant resource already in hand, 14 billion pounds of copper, 4 million ounces of gold, and plus 95 million ounces of silver. So it's a company that I stepped into initially as an investor, then I became a director, then chairman, and then recently, as of about a year ago, stepped in as the CEO and president. And I think we've made some very, very good progress, and that will continue. But it's really, to date, in my estimation, undervalued on many, many measures. And I'll take you through why that's the case. But, you know, again, it's about the resource, what it represents. And it's one of the largest undeveloped copper project not held by a major, albeit we do have a multi-billion-dollar company that owns a significant interest. And they clearly have a desire to work with us to move it forward, and potentially, likely, the natural buyer of the company. But more importantly, you know, the amount of work that's been done on the project to replicate that would be very costly. And, you know, by my measure, at least 125 to 150 million dollars US. So the benefit, I think, in many respects is, you know, this company is not going to prove to be a company that has to raise hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to get to where we're at. We're already there. We put out a very robust set of economics last year on the back of advanced engineering that showed considerable returns, you know, at 450 copper, which we're well above. Currently, I think we're trading plus $5 per pound copper. It returned an after-tax value of 3.2 billion and an internal rate of return of close to 29%. Now, the key point there is every 25-cent increase in the price of copper increases the after-tax revenue by $425 million. So again, there's much here already, and that's what really drew my attention to it. I've had experience with two previous copper companies that served me well, and many investors as well. Again, stepped into this one more as an investor, and I've accumulated a pretty large position by way of purchases in the market, option exercises, etc. Third-party validation. I think, you know, you really have to look at how projects are looked at. You know, we've got one analyst that covers it. That'll change as we continue to advance the project and the company. An engineering firm called Whittle Consulting maintains a large share position. And then Fortescue is a large iron ore company. They own approximately 35%. They're clearly very interested in moving into the transition, the EV transition that's taking place. And I think when you look at that across the spectrum, copper is a critical metal, and it will continue to drive interest. And just by its very nature, you know, if you look at supply deficit, you look at the EV transition, all of that supports why copper trades in a range and potentially higher. You look at short-term catalysts. I think the biggest issue on this company and why we're undervalued is there's always been a concern, which is grossly overstated, that we can't get community agreement. We've made many, many gains on that end since I've stepped in. We put out a press release today that speaks to some of the things that we've done as a company, and it's really about, you know, demonstrating we're a responsible community stakeholder, help them with their other business initiatives, and show them that we've got support for them as we move forward, as well appreciating that whatever we do at the project will create a good level of employment for the community. And the total community population is about 4,000 people, and we're garnering good support. There's always going to be some opposition, but that opposition is really the minority, so it's not going to get in our way. So we fully expect to get there in the near term. And I do appreciate that some of the callers will look at Alta Copper as probably investors currently, and they'll have concerns about the timeline. But, you know, we're very, very close to achieving our major objective, and you'll see us potentially starting to drill the project later this year. I would say December, January. I can't control the timelines completely, but we're making exceptional progress. But what one should look at, in my estimation, is timeline to get this project ready to move into production, and to use the term shovel ready. When can we start construction on it? Because of the advanced nature of the resource, the work that's been done on it, the engineering, we're not 10 to 20 years away from that point in time. We're probably 2 to 4 years away from being shovel ready. There's a permitting process you go through, but first order of business is, reestablishing our community relations, and we've, brought in a completely new team, and we've made some very, very good progress on that end. So commencement of drilling will simply be done for purposes of showing how much potentially bigger the resource can get. I'll speak to a few slides on that as well. Our market capitalization is very modest. It's 60 million. You do a comparison of this project based on the size of the resource, and you compare it to other groups, you'll see that they've already got a valuation that is arguably fully baked to a great extent. Ours is not. Again, the last hurdle for us is to demonstrate we can get back in there and work with the community, and we've made substantial gains on that end. So that is forthcoming. These are the numbers that folks should look at. And you look at the leverage on copper. You look at, even if copper were to fall below a certain threshold, which I don't believe is going to be the case, but even if it fell below $4, you can see that it's a pretty robust system. But at 450 copper, 3.2 billion, after tax, there's an opportunity to mitigate the tax exposure as well. That's not included within these numbers for obvious reasons. This is really just to give you a sense of the margins, but you can see that pre-tax it's close to $5.5 billion. The key points on the project, though, I think very critically, are cash flow, margin, and how much copper does it actually produce. And when you look at this, it's close to 160,000 tons of copper per annum, close to 350 million pounds of copper per annum for the first 10 years. That averages and moves itself down. But the C1 cost at $1.82, all-in cost at $1.92, again, on the back of advanced engineering reports. And the study that we put out most recently was last year. That was sort of the precursor as to what we have currently and what we believe we can add to it. I'll show you some slides on that as well. A little bit more detail on slide 8 that I wouldn't spend much time on, but you can look at it. I think the key point is that it's got a very good grade for an open pit. It starts at surface and it works its way down. There's good open extent to it. The strip ratio is very modest, and that's really what it's about, and cash flow and return. And so, as you can see on the previous slide, the payback is pretty rapid on a project that can be built large. Now, you can build it smaller and stage into the larger profile. That's ultimately not for an Alta Copper. That's going to be for the incoming group, be it a Fortescue or another group. They'll make a determination as to what the optimum way of building the project. But I think most large companies would look at maximum copper production, maximum margin. And if you were going to do that, you would look at what we've put forth in our recent preliminary economic assessment that we published last year. Comparables. Now, you can look at this and you can go, well, hey, what's, it says market cap 55 to 60 million. That number changes. You look at some of these other companies. Faraday Copper was a company that I was involved with previously. I acquired the asset, brought in a very strong team. Some of these numbers need to be adjusted. I think in their case, that's gone up substantially to about 400 million. But the key point is our valuation isn't there yet. And the only reason that it's trading at a discount is concerns that certain folks have relative to community. And do rest assured that, when I stepped in, we changed what we did at the project. We've hired local groups to assist us with that. There's always going to be some negative communications put forth. There's one individual that has put forth some negative commentary, but he's not even reputable and he doesn't represent the community. But unfortunately, certain investors look at that and they take it as fact when frankly it's fiction. But when you look at these numbers, you look at our CapEx, you look at the amount of copper we produce, you look at the margins, it matches up very, very nicely to companies that have market valuations that are considerably higher. I do fundamentally believe, and I do show that by way of purchases in the market, that we will get to these valuations, and that is not that far off. And you'll see us move forward with the community appropriately and start drilling, as I said, later this year in December or maybe in January if it gets pushed out a little bit. We don't think that's going to be the case, but for the sake of 30 to 60 days, I don't think that makes a difference relative to the investment thesis that people should look at. Now, when you look at PNAV discounts and you look at where we trade, we're trading at a considerable discount. And this is a company that had a valuation historically. It's been around for a long time. on the back of this project. Historically had a market capitalization of about 250 million. I do believe that we get back to those levels based on the numbers we put forth and based on how we can demonstrate that we move it ahead. That, when you look at these PNAV discounts, you can see that, we're at the bottom end of the spectrum, but I'm not even suggesting that we get to the 0.74, which is the far right, but I do believe you see us move up consistently over a period of time. And again, that key issue is something I've been working on and very comfortable in saying we're making some fantastic gains on it. In today's press release, if you're so inclined, look at it. But you can see that we're very supportive of the community, and they're going to be supportive to us because they know what we represent, and everything that we do with them will be on a very responsible way. And we're not looking at relocating the community. We're not looking at driving haul trucks to the community. And part and parcel of what needs to be done is, spending time by way of workshops to explain exactly what our plans are. And we've been doing that pretty effectively here for the last number of months. You look at the size of the project, and these are benchmarking slides. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I guess the key point is that when you look at where we sit on the spectrum, for the amount of dollars we generate from a net present value standpoint compared to our capital, because it's lower on a spectrum based on capital intensity, you can see that we match up very nicely to many of these other companies that have valuations that exceed ours. So I think that is one measure that folks should look at. The resource, most of it's advanced, very well advanced. Most of it's measured and indicated. Much of that will convert to proven probable reserves. The next step for us is to drill it, show how much bigger it potentially gets, but we don't necessarily need success with the drill bit. And that, from an investment perspective, is what should be focused in on. The next step for us, in addition to the drilling, is to start a feasibility study and get to the permitting stage so this project is construction ready. And it is not going to be 10 to 15 years away. And that puts us in a very, very select category of companies. Moving again towards capital intensity. How much capital do we invest to take the project to production? What does that look like based on our annual copper? Now, big companies like projects that can produce a lot of copper. This one, arguably at 350 million pounds. I'll speak to imperial measures currently based on the audience, but anytime you can produce 350 million pounds to 400 million pounds of copper per annum and have a payback of less than 2 to 3 years, depending on what copper prices are trading at, that more than justifies that investment. And clearly, when you look at this slide, you can see that we're, again, at the right end of the curve, if you will. Total capital intensity based on production, based on mill capacity, because of the nature of the ore and the bond work index. The nature of the ore is softer. We can process with one SAG mill, 2 ball mills, 120,000 tonnes a day. Now, again, this is based on a very recent engineering study prepared by Ausenco, which is a very preeminent group. They understand South America very, very well. They did the construction management on Constantia, which is a project owned by Hudbay, currently in production, and also the feasibility work on Safrano, which is a project that Teck has that has recently received approval from Synopsys to allow them to move to construction. Now, that is the starting point for us. So the amount of capital we need to do these things isn't going to be exhaustive. It's not going to create dilution. We've only got 94 million shares outstanding, strong shareholder base. However, have we experienced the gains that certain other copper developers have experienced? No. Do I think that does change? By all means, it does. When you look at our mine life, 27 years, that's already in itself significant. But the key point on our project, and I will turn to it, is that it's only had a cumulative amount of drilling of 85,000 meters. So you compare it to certain other projects that are on this slide, including one that I was the founder of that I retired from in 2018. It had approximately 400,000 to 500,000 meters of drilling. Faraday Copper, they've done an exceptional job with it, but it has approximately 350 to 400,000 meters of drilling. Our project has had nothing but success and only cumulative 85,000 meters of drilling. So pretty modest. And so we do think that when you look at current modeling that we've done, bringing the data into a 3D model, we know that there's targets to chase that show depth extent, lateral extent. There's a secondary deposit that looks like it's going to get that much bigger, and the third deposit. The DIA, which is the application you make based on current mining law in Peru, is a pretty exhaustive document. We got that approved last year. That allows for 43,000 meters of drilling, 40 drill platforms. The next order of business for us is to also advance on certain other permits, which were well advanced currently with the Ministry of Energy and Mines. We've got exceptional support from them. Concurrently, they'll work with the community, put in place agreements with the individuals that own the surface rights. You'll see something happen on that in the near term. And then obviously the final requirement is to have community agreement and support, which we do expect to get. Has that taken a little bit longer than we would like? Of course it has, but at the end of the day, I don't think it changes the fundamentals on why this investment is going to be pretty attractive for all. Location. It's got a very good location. We got the Pan American Highway to the north, 24 kilometers. We would build a road to the Pan American Highway. We wouldn't relocate the community, wouldn't drive haul trucks to the community. Infrastructure is available to us. Power is available to us at a considerable discount to what you typically see on many projects. Typically, you fly into Chiclayo and it's a 7-hour drive by way of road. However, as the project advances, the ideal way of accessing it would be by way of building a road from the project location to the Pan American Highway, which is 24 kilometers to the north. And so full port facilities, attractive power costs, all have the right attributes. People at one point were concerned with Peru. Clearly, they appreciate how important mining is. We have 3 different projects. Caniarco is the main project that we're focusing on from a capital allocation standpoint. Don Gregorio and Aracapé are projects that are very prospective that we've had as a company for a number of years that predate me. Again, this company was in existence for plus 20 years. But when you look at this slide, it really is, hey, what's our land package look like? What do the projects look like? And clearly it demonstrates that, you know, Peru does truly appreciate the importance of mining. And we've got fantastic support from the current president, Ministry of Energy and Mines, Montero, and he's been very supportive, as well as the province of Lambayeque. And so, again, we're making considerable headway. We're in the northern part of Peru as well, near La Granja, which has approximately, and that's a project that currently First Quantum holds by way of an option from Rio, currently has approximately 8 times the amount of drilling that we have. So that's a good reference point to show you that, hey, we've got opportunity here. Moving to the next slide, shows you the type of option agreement we entered into last year. It is success driven, but it's on a project that we weren't allocating capital to. We've already received the share consideration that's worth, you know, arguably close to $1 million. You've got a smelter royalty, you've got further cash payments and additional payments. Again, if this company has success, and we believe it will, based on the data that we've already provided them with, it works out to be of good value to Alta Copper, and none of that obviously is reflected in our market valuation. We'll intend to do the same thing with our other project on Gregorio, and we have another project in BC called Canyon Creek that we endeavor to do the same thing with, venture them out. Our primary focus remains Caniarco. Kind of want to talk about, and these are the other projects you can look at, but again, very interesting by any measure, and active discussions on Don Gregorio and starting discussions on Canyon Creek. But again, Aracapé, we put that in place about 6 months ago, and that's progressing nicely as we expect it to. The drill bit, what does that represent? Again, there's significant upside. Taking the data historically and putting it into a 3D geological model and looking at what should have been drilled. And that's not a negative criticism of what was done historically. They did a very, very good job, but they had a good level of success, stepped out. Diversion was very consistent. And by way of that drilling, they never drilled below a certain depth, and 32 of 45 drill holes bottom in mineralization. So the question being, is there upside? This slide gives you a sense of the resource. If you wanted to look at it in terms of copper equivalent pounds, of course, that represents size in itself at 16 billion pounds. But I like to break it down into what quantum of gold, silver, and copper. Copper, 14 billion pounds, gold, 4 million ounces, silver, 95 million ounces. When we ran our numbers, and you can look at our economics, we ran the gold values at $18.50 and we ran silver values at approximately $25. Those valuations have doubled up. So regardless, if we reran those numbers, you'd see a significant improvement already with what we have. The key point, and I have to impress it upon everyone, is we already have what is significant. What we're endeavoring to do next is not complicated. It's just a matter of managing the process and moving it forward. I do understand how a project gets permitted. I did permit one of the largest copper projects in the American Southwest a number of years ago by way of legislation. And that was interesting in itself. And, you know, we're adopting the same sort of strategy. How do we do this differently? How do we get the support? How do we build upon the relationships? And, you know, that really does take time and effort, but we've established that on a consistent basis and shown them community that we're here, but we want to be here in a positive, responsible fashion. Now, these three deposits, Norte Sur, Verde in technical terms is not a deposit yet. We believe there's an opportunity there. We want to drill it further. Our drill permit with Ministry of Energy and Mines comprises 43,000 meters. The first phase is 10,000 meters. Drill costs will be approximately $400 to $450 per meter. So it's not going to create a dilution exercise per se. It's not like I have to raise $20 and $50 million at a tranche to do what I've already got. And I've already got that in hand. It's really to demonstrate that there's a lot there, a lot more there. And, you know, when you look at Norte Sur, 15 drill holes, pretty modest drilling program, and it already sits on 2.5 billion pounds of copper. So when we look at location, you look at drill density, satellite imagery is here for two reasons, shows you where the drill density takes place, but also demonstrates that, as you can see, there's no community nearby, there's no caseríos or hamlets, so we don't create any negative visual impact. That's a big plus, but explaining that to them and spending the time by way of our new team that's been in place for the last 8 months has been very, very positive. In fact, it was, you know, it's demonstrating to them that, hey, this is not a direct impact on what they do. In fact, you'll benefit from this in many, many ways, inclusive of the things that we can do for you as a community stakeholder and help you out with some of the other agricultural projects. So again, I do impress upon you, take a look at the press release that we issued today, and you can see that we've got a good level of support, contrary to what certain individuals have assumed on this project for an extended period of time. This gives you a sense of where we want to drill. This is the blue vertical lines represent 43,000 meters in total. That's not the intent. We want to drill at 10,000 meters at a time. Success driven. We're very comfortable in saying that we do believe we'll have a good level of success. I'll show you one cross section and then I'll turn it to some questions in the interest of time here. This takes a slice through the open pit. You can see where it's located. And then we move to the section itself, and you can see the hot, warm colors and what they represent: 1% copper, 0.8 copper. But when you look at the ability to gain success with lateral potential, that clearly exists. You look at the high-grade nature of drilling it deeper, because we think there's continuity and the grades get better at depth. Again, it starts from surface and works its way down. But those three intervals above, if you will, demonstrate, you know, out of the 32 out of 45 drill holes, the bottom mineralization, this is just an example of three of them. You know, 216 meters of 0.65, 292 meters of 0.71, 59 meters of 1%. So, of course, there's an opportunity on Norte to expand upon it, chase the grade at depth. We believe there's an opportunity laterally as well. And then also drill the other two deposits, one specifically Sur, it's only had the 15 drill holes, add upon what we already got there. But as noted, 2.5 billion pounds already. If you look at those valuations and you start comparing it side by side, and you look at the economics, we match up very, very nicely. And so, you know, the key hurdle that remains is pretty modest to overcome, albeit it has taken a bit longer than I would like, but we're very, very close to it. So I would impress investors to look at the numbers and appreciate there's a reason that Fortescue owns an interest. There's a reason that other investors are accumulating position. More sections to show you the depth extent, the lateral extent, timeline. You know, anytime you can look at a copper project that's not 20 years away from being construction ready, I think that's a key point. And this one isn't. It's been touted as a bigger asset that's not held by a major. It's been touted as one that's not 10 to 20 years away from being shovel ready. So those are kind of key points. If you want to look at greater detail, you can. I will go back a little bit here to leave you with one slide, which I think is pretty compelling, if I could. And then I'll turn it to some questions if I can. A question that was put forth is, are you an acquisition candidate? By all means. I mean, without a doubt, Fortescue acquiring that interest over a period of time, having board representation, they're clearly interested. From my perspective, it is about valuation. I do understand values, I believe. You know, those benchmarking slides give you a good sense of what this project is ultimately worth in today's price point, today's environment. Clearly, gold and silver have taken off. Copper's trading in a good range. You'll start to see more M&A activity. Of course, many copper companies are in the same position. But I would say that if you look at the size of a resource, you look at the upside potential, geologically speaking, and you look at the economics, it speaks for itself. And so relationship with Fortescue is positive. They've been a supportive shareholder, but from my perspective, my fundamental role is to act in the best interest of all shareholders. I am a considerable shareholder. I've acquired my shares in the open market. And, when you look at that share position, I have a view of what this company is worth. And quite frankly, I think it's worth 4 to 6 times of what we're currently trading at. I think certain investors will accumulate. Certain other investors may react based on sound bites or information that they pick up on social media networks, but much of that is false. It's put forth by an individual who professed to be the president. He's not. Again, we're making exceptional progress with the community, and I leave you with that thought. Catalyst for the re-rating, very simple. Something that it's pretty imminent. That's community agreement for an extended period of time, and then start in on a drilling program, but continue on with feasibility work to get it to a point where it's shovel ready. Now, if you did a side by side and you compare it to many other companies and look at that one slide that I put forth earlier, you can see why there's an opportunity. And, even if I'm going to still trade at a value that's not as high as theirs, that still shows you why it's a very compelling opportunity. And at the end of the day, you have to appreciate that most companies on that slide and others that don't even have the same size of resource or economics, many of them don't have the skill set or the ability to build the projects. They don't have the execution team. They don't have the balance sheet. So you'll see that advance appropriately. There's a question here: who's the key person you need to get on side? It is the community as a whole. We need majority support. We believe we have it. We simply have to go through a process. There's not an elected president per se, so we'll be holding a general assembly to get approvals. We've already started the negotiations as of 30 days ago to get the surface rights for the areas that we have to drill. So all of which is advancing very, very nicely. Social license community agreement, I've spoken about it enough. Today's press release gives you a sense of where we sit, making fantastic gains. What's left is not that difficult. It's more a function of going through the final steps, and we're very close to it. We've already got arguably complete sign off. There's certain things we have to do, of course, but nothing but support from the Ministry of Energy and Mines and the minister himself and the province. Northern Peru is an area that they want to build out projects, and so we are making those gains. I think at the end of the day, though, when we look at other opportunities, the catalysts are very, very simple to attain. It's not like I need to continue to drill it to grow a deposit. I've already got a deposit of considerable size, but do I think there's an opportunity to grow it further? By all means, by all means. So with that said, thank you very much for attending. If there's any other questions, please put them forth. I think one just came in, 450 copper, your value. Yeah, exactly. That's the key point. And so there is a bit of a disconnect, without a doubt. That does change, and it really, as you have other discussions with other groups, and the one thing that everyone should understand very clearly is, of course, there's ongoing discussions with Fortescue. They've been very supportive, but there's other incoming groups that are very interested because of the size of the deposit and also the economics that are very defendable. When we look at our capital number, it's got a 20% contingency. We look at our all-in costs. Without a doubt, there's a clear opportunity here to bridge the gap. And frankly, when you look at the valuations of some of these companies at 300, 400 million, 500 million, and you look at our valuation at 60 million, it's not going to be that difficult to get to that next stage. And it's really something that I think we've done an exceptional job managing. And, without, underestimating it. Sure, it's taken us a bit longer than we'd like, but, we've worked it forward on a parallel basis with the ministry. So you'll see that forthcoming. We will wait till we get there. I do expect to put that out in the coming months, days. I mean, I can't define that completely, but it's definitely going to happen based on the progress we've made. So with that said, I think I'm at the end of my timeline. Thank you very, very much for calling in today. And, please feel free to reach out anytime if any subsequent questions. I cover the material pretty quickly, but without a doubt, it's a fantastic opportunity for those that appreciate copper and appreciate why it's trading a discount and why there's an opportunity to do what's exceptionally well for yourselves by way of investing today and adding to a position if you're already a shareholder. Thank you.